Hello, welcome back to Breaking Down Breaking Bad. We're on Season 1, Episode 5, Grey Matter. I forgot the title for a second there. Grey Matter. Now, for me, throughout Season 1, or throughout my first viewing of Season 1, and I know someone's watching these videos now and they don't want to be spoiled anything in the future, but I always want to see more of the Grey Matter stuff. I want to see more of Elliot and Gretchen. Gretchen, the former girlfriend of Walter White, and Elliot, the former partner of Walter White, and we get more of their backstory in this episode. And I always wanted more from that, so it's cool for me to watch their interaction with Walt in this episode, and just to see those characters in general, because that's kind of a side of Walter that, not to spoil things, does kind of get lost later on. I mean, it's referenced and stuff, but I want to see more of it. So it's cool for me now to revisit this. And I have to say now, after watching this 5th episode, and there's only 2 more to go now. I mean, it was a very short season. I believe the writer's strike had something to do with that. I'll look into the details of that and mention that in the final episode of this first series of reviews of the first season of Breaking Bad. But yeah, I feel like now, revisiting this after having seen everything that came after it. Again, I've seen seasons 2, 3, 4, and 5 twice each. This is my first time watching the first season twice. My opinion has always been that the show has just gone from strength to strength. There's the first season, which is great. The second one just builds off what the first one started. The third one is just even better. The fourth one is unbelievable. And the 5th one is just the best season of TV I've ever seen. I have to go back on that now. I feel like the first season is superior to the second season. Based on my memory of the second season, it felt like a couple of episodes dragged. And we'll get to that, obviously, and I'll see if maybe my opinion changes on that too. But for now, my ranking would put the first season above the second season. So it's kind of ruined that streak where I say to people that the seasons just get better as they go on and on. Now, season 2 is still fantastic, but there was something really powerful about this episode that I'd kind of forgotten. There's a key scene in this episode which my memory of was more of humor than of emotion, and it really surprised me, and I'll get to that. So we open the episode up with Jesse in a business suit, and he's at a sales place, a very respectable establishment. He's there with his CV to get a job in sales, and the suit behind the desk says, "No, son, this ain't a sales job, you're going to be doing advertising." And he opens, kind of a cheesy kind of reveal, he pulls the blinds back and we see a guy outside in one of those big kind of, what's the word, comical suits, spinning a sign around to promote the business, and Jesse kind of he leaves and he's like, screw that. But it turns out the guy who was outside the building doing the promotion is one of his friends, Badger. So again, another first appearance of a character who will go on to be in many episodes to come. Badger kind of tracks down Jesse across the street and says, "What you doing?" They go for a smoke in the alley, and Jesse says, "I'm trying to," well, he didn't say he's trying to go straight, but you get the idea as the viewer that Jesse's trying to go straight. He's been through a lot with what happened with Walt, the 2 people that died in his house, or well, one that died in his house, one that died in his RV. One was, disintegrated in his house, the other one was choked to death, but it's the same principle. He went through a lot with those 2 guys being bumped off, and then his parents, he went back to them, and that didn't work out either. And knowing what we know at the end of the last episode, where his little brother kind of was the one who had that little joint that got him in trouble, I really feel for Jesse, and I feel frustrated, and he's there and he's clearly trying, he's cleaned himself up, he's in a suit, but he can't get anywhere. The guy says, you need 2 years experience, you need all of this stuff, you need a college education, and so Jesse's he's frustrated. And Badger's there spinning the sign around, and he's like, "Hey man, you could do this," and it's just like a great line where Jesse's like, "Yeah, you've really opened my eyes up to a lot of possibilities." And then Badger's like, "You got any more of that crystal?" And Jesse's like, "No, I'm retiring, I'm not doing that anymore." And Badger's like, "Oh, come on, man." He's like, "That stuff was really good. We could really get something going here." And he's like, "Oh, I don't know about that." So they go their separate ways. Jesse gets back in the car. He's looking at the classified ads for jobs, and it pauses on him for a minute, and then he leaves the car. And obviously he's decided to maybe go over to Badger and maybe give cooking crystal meth another try. And then the title's Breaking Bad. So another good little opening scene, cold open. And then we start with Walt and Skyler, who are on their way to this birthday party, the birthday party of Elliot, who was Walter's former partner with the company Grey Matter. And it's a huge house. It is a completely different world from Walt and Skylar, who again live a very much kind of middle class life. This is upper class, you know. This huge house. I mean, there's a valet service outside, for God's sake. And Walt's got this tiny little dinky present, and he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have brought it." They said no gifts. They turn up, and there's this mountain of gifts in the backyard and stuff. And so Walt's stressing out about that, and then overcome Elliot and Gretchen. At first, Elliot comes over and it's very, "Oh, hi Elliot, how's it going?" all that kind of stuff. They're very amicable. And then Gretchen comes over, and we can tell from the flashbacks in the previous episodes that Gretchen was probably a former girlfriend of Walt. And he gives her a hug and stuff, and there's a tiny bit of awkwardness there. I loved how it wasn't overly awkward, but there was a bit of awkward atmosphere in the air there, because obviously when Walt and Gretchen go in for the hug, it's former lovers, you know, and so you have Elliot and Skylar standing there, and they don't really play off that very much, but just in my head I was thinking, what's going through Elliot's head right there, you know, what's going through Skylar's head. They're both, you know, they're all linked, these four people, in terms of the love lives that they've had over the past 20 odd years. And, you know, the party goes on, and Walt is, you know, he's talking to people, and he goes inside the house, and there's this really nice library room, and he's like, wow, you know, looking up and stuff, and it's kind of you see the pictures on the wall of Elliot. He's won all these awards and things, and you kind of get a window into what perhaps Walt's life might have been like if he had gone down the route that Elliot went down. And Elliot introduces Walt to some people, not introduce him to, no, he does actually. No, he doesn't. Someone that Walt knows from the past brings Walt over to some other people who he hasn't met. Introduces him, says, "This is Walter White. He was brilliant back in the day. You know, he solved things for us. You know, he had a real good mind and everything, and he formed the company with Elliot, Grey Matter. That's where the name comes from. Elliot Schwartz. Schwartz is black. Walter White, black and white. You have grey. And so the guys who don't know Walt's are like, oh, so you're Elliot's partner then? And they're like, he's like, no, I'm not. I'm not partner with Elliot. And you know, I went into teaching, went into education. Sorry for my stuttering there. I'll leave that in, as always. And they're like, oh, you went to education, which university? And Walt just like sucks a sip of his drink and doesn't answer the question. And then it cuts to the scene where Elliot is opening all his presents, and he's like, oh wow, a Stratocaster. And they're like, not just any Stratocaster, that's one of Eric Clapton's. And he's like, he reads the back of the guitar, and he's like, to Elliot, my good friend, you know, whatever, Eric Clapton. And it's just like, it was a little bit too much, I think, to have a signed Eric Clapton guitar. Well, I suppose it's within the realms of possibility, but it felt like it was pushing the point home maybe a bit too much. Again, I'm trying to find something to pick at this show. It's really hard. But the rest of the scene is great. You know, you have Walt and Skylar kind of back amidst the crowd who are all clamoring over Elliot opening his presents, and Skylar says, like, you know, why is he doing this? And it's like he's an 8-year-old kid or something. Everyone's gathering around to see him open his presents and stuff. And then he gets the present from Walt, which is this tiny thing, and he opens it up, and Walt's like, oh god. And it's a pack of cheap noodles. And at first you think it's going to go down like a fart in church, and it kind of does. But then Elliot kind of explains the story that this is what me and Walt used to live off of for like 10 months. And he makes the joke that, you know, I'm sure this is what contributed to our success, but it's a symbol of where they came from and the beginnings of what's got Elliot to where he is now, and so on and so forth. So he makes a point to tell everyone that it meant something to him, and he thanked Walter for it. And then we cut to Walt and Elliot, you know, sitting down and having a good old laugh about the old days. And then Elliot kind of says, hey Walt, you know, why don't you come work for me at Grey Matter, you know. You could really use someone like you around, you know. Sometimes you get stuck in these things where you're trying to solve a problem, and for months you've got tunnel vision. All it takes is someone to come in with a fresh set of eyes on it, and it could make the world a difference. And Walt's like, really? You know, and you can tell that he's thinking about it and thinking, you know, the money would be a lot better. And he doesn't say that, but you're imagining that's what he's thinking in his head. And then he's like, well, I don't know, Elliot, because I've got some problems. He's building up to tell Elliot that he's got cancer. And Elliot's like, we can deal with it, you know. We got great health insurance. And Walt kind of, I mean, it's just sublime acting from Bryan Cranston. You see everything that's going on inside his head through his facial expression. And you can tell that he looks at it like, oh yeah, how does he know I've got cancer? Then he looks over at Skylar. And before this, we'd seen Walt looking off and seeing Skylar talking with Elliot. So it all clicks. That she has told Elliot that Walt has cancer. And then Elliot says, you know, look, he offers to pay for Walt's treatment for the cancer. Well, no, he doesn't. We don't see him say that. We don't see him say that because we see that look where Walt looks out to Skylar and he realizes it and his expression sours, and then we cut to Walt and Skylar leaving and Walt slams the door and stuff and he's like, "You told him about the cancer, didn't you?" And she's like, "What? He kind of pushed it out of me." And he's like, and Walt is really pissed off, and he's like, "You know, he offered me a job at Grey Matter, and he offered to pay for my treatment, and that's why you told him, isn't it? You told him so that he would offer me the money for the treatment and offer me the job and stuff." She's like, "No, I just, you know." So Walt is really, he's affronted by this. He's really not happy about the fact that this guy, who, you know, is the owner of this company that they started together and is obviously doing a lot better. We don't know at this point why Walt sectioned off from them. Maybe it was to do with Gretchen, obviously, because it seems like he was with her before. I mean, we know that, you know, at this point that Walt and Gretchen were a thing, and now Elliot and Gretchen are a thing, and that obviously that had something to do with the split, and why Elliot is now big and successful, and Walt is a high school teacher. And you know, is it a lot to do with pride, you know? And will Walt accept, you know, the payment for this treatment, the chemotherapy for his cancer, you know, which is very expensive, as they went over in the last episode where Walt was like, you know, talking 90 grand, you know. It's a lot of money, and what if it doesn't work? I'm going to leave you with all that debt. So money is a big issue here as to whether Walt is going to even go through this therapy, even go through this treatment to his cancer, right? And he just is really pissed off that Skylar told Elliot, and that Elliot was kind of, in Walt's mind, Elliot was kind of trying to give him a job and pay for his treatment out of pity. And that's something that clearly doesn't sit well with Walt whatsoever. And so that kind of unfolds over the episode, obviously. Then we cut to Jesse and Badger. He brings Badger over to the RV, and there's a great little moment where Badger notices all the bullet holes in the door from the first episode. He's like, "Yo, dude, those bullet holes? No, yeah, that's like ventilation." And Badger's like, "Huh, cool." And then Jesse's like, you know, showing Badger all the beakers and stuff, and he's like, "This is a so-and-so, and this is one of these, and this is a so-and-so flask." And Badger's like, "Wow, you really know your shit." And he's like, "Well, it's just like basic chemistry, yo." But you see the effect that Walt has had on Jesse. You know, he was listening. He was looking at he knows what all the things are now. Like when Walt turned up in episode 1, and he's like, "No, this is a boiling flask. You need one of these." And Jesse's like, "Ah, it's all the same." But now at this point, he's taken it in, and he's seen what Jesse perceives to be art in cooking this meth, and he's taken it all on board. And he's taking it very seriously. So they drive off into the desert and start cooking the meth. Badger is playing around and stuff. He's not taking it seriously. Jesse is being very serious, and he's trying to get it right. And he messes it up. Badger's like, "This is great. We can sell this. It's awesome." And Jesse's like, "Nope, nope. It's not right. It's cloudy. It should be clear." And Badger's like, "Who cares?" Jesse goes and throws it out into the desert, and Badger loses his shit. He's like, "I can't believe we've done this. We could have sold this. I could have smoked this," you know. And Jesse's like, "No, we're going to do it until we get it right." And that, again, it's interesting to see Jesse taking it so seriously, and the effect that Walt has had on him up to this point. Then we cut to Walt Jr., who's out, and he's trying to score some beer from a gas station, and he goes up and asks the guy, "Hey, we haven't got our ID, can you buy a 6-pack for us?" And the guy turns out to be a copper. He turned out to be a policeman, so he was really he was really up shit creek without paddle, to say the least. And we see Hank come to pick Walt Jr. up, and Hank's like, "It's not cool, man, not cool." And Walt's like, "Come on, you tell me you never tried to do this before?" And Hank's like, "No, it's not that. You called me. Why didn't you call your dad? How do you think Walt's going to feel about this, that you called me to come and pick you up?" So Hank drops off Walt Jr. and he talks to Skylar and Marie, and obviously they're annoyed that Walt Jr.'s gone out to try and get beer underage, but also they talk about the weed that happened, you know, a few episodes ago, where Hank took Walt Jr. out to show him the seedy life of drug users and stuff, and how marijuana is a gateway drug and you shouldn't do weed. And Marie says that. She says, "Oh, well, it's, you know, he's going for the drink now, he's been the weed." And Skylar, "We talking about the weed?" And she said, "Well, you told me that Walt Jr. was..." She said, No, Walt was smoking weed. You know, it wasn't Walt Jr., it was Walt. This goes back to the lie that Walter told in the first episode, I believe, where he passed off his, or in the second episode, he passed off his involvement with Jesse Pinkman to his wife Skylar. I feel like I'm getting things really confusing for people, but if you've seen the episode, you'll know what I'm talking about. You know, he passes Jesse, his involvement with Jesse off as he sells me weed. I like it. So, you know, Skylar says, no, that's who is been smoking weed. Walt, not Walt Jr. And Marie's like, oh. And Hank is just kind of like, well, I think I wrote down a line that he said, Walt smoking weed, didn't think he had it in him, you know, like Hank, that tickles Hank, and that in effect tickled me. And then we cut back to Jesse and Badger, and the batch isn't good again, so he goes to throw that again, and Badger's like, I've wasted all my money on this, and you've thrown it all away. And they get into a fight. He picks up Jesse, spins him around, he's knocking flasks off the desk, and he's like, helicopter bitch, he spins him around. They get into a fight. Badger gets thrown out of the RV, and Jesse just takes off and leaves Badger in the dust out in the desert in the middle of nowhere with his little crossbow shooting arrows at the RV. It's a real funny scene. But Jesse, he can't crack it. He knows all the steps, but he just can't. He doesn't have the magic touch of Walter White. He can't get it perfect. And so I liked seeing that side of, you know, we're seeing Walt try and go back to a normal life. We're seeing and dealing with his family not being happy with the fact that he doesn't want to do treatment, and we see Jesse trying to replicate, you know, the money that he just made off of the batch that him and Walt cooked up, and he wants to, you know, you can tell how Jesse was trying to get back on the straight and narrow, but it just keeps on pulling me back, you know, and so he tried to do it again, and he couldn't come up with the same stuff. And even though at the beginning of the series, you know, which in the timeline of the show was only a few weeks back, Jesse doesn't care about the quality of the stuff. You know, he puts in his chili powder, as you know, that's his signature and everything, but Walt's like, no, it needs to be pure. If we're going to do this, it's going to be the purest stuff. Now Jesse, it's rubbed off on Jesse. He wants to have the purest product as well. Then we get to the big scene in the film, in the episode. I'll leave that in as well. It's the pillow scene. Walt comes home. We've got Skylar, Walt Jr., Marie, Hank. The whole family's there. She says, "Sit down, Walt." You know, without saying it, it's an intervention. And she's got this little pillow, and she's like, "This is the talking pillow." So she's giving Walt a piece of her mind, and he's trying to cut in. She's like, "Nope, I got the talking pillow." All right. So she lays it down to her husband. She says, how can you do this to us? You have a family, and you're telling us you're not even going to attempt to go ahead with this treatment. Why are you throwing your life away? She gives the pillow to Hank, and Hank tries to kind of reason with Walt, and kind of doesn't really work because he tries using sporting references. And then he says something really funny where he's like, you know, look, Walt, you were dealt a shit hand. And I just couldn't help but crack up at this, where, you know, 15 seconds, 20 seconds earlier, Anna Gunn's performance of Skylar in this scene is so great because she is speaking so intensely to her husband about, you know, literally a life and death situation here, a potential life and death situation here. He can either live by, you know, by trying this therapy, which might prolong his life, or he can give up and literally die. And she's trying to convince her husband to not die, you know, or at least try not to. And the way that, it's not even a voice shaking, it's the way her lips are quivering as she is speaking. You just totally believe the intensity of a situation like this. And I think I've said this before, like I haven't been in, well, I've been in some intense situations. I think we all have with our family, maybe friends, maybe strangers, where you get into this real intense emotional zone. And you start to lose control of your body. You start to lose control of the fact that you're shaking, or that you're, you know, and I just love how she performed that scene. I really bought it completely. And it just builds and escalates. And the scene is so well put together, so well done. And it has these funny moments, like where Hank says, look, well, you were dealt a shit hand, you know. And Marie's like, come on, you know, Hank and stuff, and trying to keep him in check and stuff. He passes the pillow over to Walt Jr. And this is where it gets really intense for me. You know, Walt Jr.'s like, I'm pissed off, but he won't look at his dad. And Skylar says, look at him. So he looks at him, he says, I'm pissed off. He's like, you're being a pussy. You're throwing your life away. And he says, you know, picks up his crutches and he says, you know, would you give up on me? Everything I've been through? It's a great performance by R.J. Mitty, who I will admit, you know, he goes up and down throughout the series, and he has his moments, and this is one of them where it really got me. But as good as his performance was, Bryan Cranston really sold it, because Walt is there silently holding his face over his mouth. He's trying to keep his emotions in check, and it's that thing where you see actors cry, and you'll see the one solitary tear that they force out and it rolls down. Bryan Cranston has a great way of doing it, where the tears, they just stream down really quickly. And it's almost because of the tone of his skin and the wrinkles in his face, that you almost don't see it. But if you look hard enough, especially on Blu-ray, you see the tears trickle down very quickly, very naturally. They just feel like they've been released. They haven't been pushed out. And his son is giving him a piece of his mind. And it got me emotional. It really did. And if it had gone on much longer, I probably would have teared up myself. But it was a really, really powerful moment between a father and a son, where he's saying, you know, you're giving up on me, you know, by throwing your life away like this, and how he doesn't agree with it. Then we go to Marie, and she throws a complete spanner in the works by saying, Walt, I think you should do what you want to do. Skylar loses her shit. She is like, what the hell are you talking about, Marie? How can you, why are you saying this? And she's like, well, I do. I've sat here, I've listened to everyone say their opinion, and I think he should do what he wants. It's his life. We're all sat around talking about, you know, what he's going to do with his life. It should be his decision. And Skylar cannot believe that her sister is throwing her under the bus like this. And that's what makes the scene so great and so gripping to watch. Finally, Walt gets the pillow. Whew. And, you know, they're all arguing, and he puts his finger in his mouth and whistles, and everyone shuts up, and he says, right now I've got the pillow. So he sits down, and he proceeds to tell them how, you know, just, it's a fantastic scene, fantastic monologue, delivered perfectly, where he says that, you know, he could have a longer life, but what, a year, 2 years, you know, does he really want to be sitting there marking time? Does he want to be struggling, you know, having this chemotherapy, ruining his body? Does he really want to spend the last, you know, months, years of his life being cared after by his wife, not being able to function, losing his hair, not being able to sit down and enjoy a meal, make love with his wife? You know, does he really want that? And he's decided that he doesn't. And he says this really heartbreaking line where he says that my whole life I've never felt like I've made any choices. I've felt like it's been made for me. And the look on Skylar's face when he says that is heartbreaking. But he says it, and he throws it all out there for the first time, where it's just like, you know, I need to make a choice. I need to have control of my life for once. It's a brilliant scene, and this was the scene that just said to me, man, this first season, it's just phenomenal. Again, maybe I'll change my mind after we get to the ending in episode 7, but it was just an amazing scene, and it's been a joy so far to sit down and watch these episodes week after week and not binge watch it, and to let everything settle. I can't wait to watch episode 6, and I have to wait a week. Don't have to, but I'm going to. I'm forcing myself to, and it makes it more interesting to me. I don't know why. I'm sure that in the future I'll binge watch the series and stuff like that, but I mean, just now it's great experiencing the show in this serialized format every week, the way that, you know, TV shows were meant to be, the way that it goes back to the 20s, the 30s, where we'd have serials in the cinema. You go there every Saturday and watch another episode, and the story would continue every week. You'd look forward to the next installment, the cliffhangers, and that's kind of, you know, the art of the cliffhanger is almost lost these days with the Netflix generation, where you can watch the whole season. It's like, there you go, plump, you know, the whole shebang is right there for you to watch and just plow through, and that is great. And there's something to be said for binge watching, but there's also something to be said for traditionally watching a show one episode at a time per week, or per 2 weeks, or every other day. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to wait a week, but for me, it's the way that it was originally done, and I kind of like experiencing it in a new way. And yeah, that scene was great, and Walt kind of just laying it down on the line, you know, just saying, I don't want to do this. I want to sleep in my own bed. I want to live in my own house, you know, for whatever time I got left. Again, I paraphrase when I quote these things. I'm just trying to get the essence of the scene and everything. This was a great episode. It didn't stand out as much as the previous ones in terms of cinematography. It was very much just flat out about the characters and the emotion. They didn't try and do any fancy tricks like, you know, the see-through shot or anything like that. There's a couple of really cool time-lapse shots of the RV in the desert when Jesse and Badger are out there, but for the most part, you're really just focusing in on these characters. I really loved Dean Norris in this episode for some reason. He was really funny as Hank, but I loved it when he said, "I don't get a chance to say this to you, Walter, but I care about you," you know, and we all do. And it's just one of those tricky situations where they all want the best for him, and he just wants, you know, to again, for the first time in his life, make a choice about his own life. You know, what I want, what I need is a choice. And there's a beautiful scene following this where Walt wakes up in bed and he reaches his arm out and Skylar's already up. And he just puts his face on her pillow and he looks over onto the bedside table and he takes out this, I don't know, like a cream or an ointment or whatever that she obviously uses, and he opens it and he smells it and he puts his face down in the pillow again, and it just seems to be breathing in the essence of his wife, you know, and just trying to savor, you know, a moment of just you know, having it all in perspective and thinking about everything. You know, I've had those moments where, you know, you'll wake up in the morning and you'll just kind of you'll think about things, and you'll take that minute or so to just kind of reflect on whatever it is that's going on in your life. And I just really loved that scene for some reason. It was quiet, calm, and serene, and it said a lot without saying anything. You got the point. He gets up and Skylar's doing the dishes. He comes up behind her, gives her a hug, and he says, "All right." And she just plays it so perfectly. And again, you know, you can tell that she wants to kind of go, "You're going to do it," but she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to give herself false hope, and she's like, "All right, what?" And he turns around and he says, "All right, I'll do the treatment." And it takes her a while for it to settle in, and she realizes that he's going to do this. He's going to try and live, and that the night that she spent thinking that she, you know, has got a limited time span left with her husband, the love of her life, and that he's going to let himself die, you know, that's been taken back. Now there's hope again. And again, it's a fantastic scene, and we go and we see that Walt goes off to start the chemotherapy, and we see him get put down in the table and the stuff around his chair. I don't know how it works, but I mean, you get this clinical sense of I don't like hospitals. I don't like the clean, clinical kind of cold feeling you get in them, and this scene really captured that for some reason. I don't know why. Just the way that it was a nice shot, like a complete perspective over the top of Walt, much like when we saw him take the MRI in the first episode. It's looking right down at Walt as he's there with his arms up on these poles, and he's got the plastic around his chest, and the machine's beeping off and stuff. And what else can I say about this episode? Oh yeah, another line that just in the midst of all the emotion really made me laugh was when, you know, Marie says, you know, "I think Walt should do what he wants to do," and Hank says, "Can I take the pillow back? I'm going to agree with her." And he's like, "He wants to die like a man," you know, and I respect that, and it just really cracked me up. But again, a situation which doesn't really you wouldn't really expect comedy to be a part of that, but it's just it's just these moments that really, and it helps to undercut it so you're not sat there for like 5-6 minutes just getting almost worn out by the emotion of it. You get the kind of the jokes in there every now and again, not even jokes, but just and it fits within the character of Hank to say that kind of thing, because he's very much someone who likes to kind of disarm these situations with his humor, so it fit perfectly. After the chemotherapy scene, we see Walt drive down a street. He parks his car, and and also, as they're sitting there waiting for him to go to the chemotherapy, Skylar's like, "Okay, they're going to charge it on the credit card," and Walt's like, "Oh, okay, cool." And she's like, "And Elliot's going to send a check, right?" And Walt's like, "Yeah, it's all going to be taken care of." And you're thinking, right, okay. And again, Hank was saying in the pillow scene, he was saying, "Look, take the money and run, you know, accept the payment from Elliot, you know, why not?" Walt can't do it. On principle, he can't do it. Anyway, the final scene, he drives up to a street, he parks his car, he's about to get out of the car for some reason, and his phone rings, and it's Gretchen. And he's like, "Oh, hey, Elliot," and she's like, "No, it's Gretchen." Kind of, you know, and you get the feeling these two haven't spoken one-on-one in a very long time, and she's sat at a, you know, like well, she sat at home basically. I don't need to explain the setup of where she's standing or what what the set looks like, but Gretchen's at home and she's speaking to Walt. She's alone, as is he in his car, and she says, Elliot told me about the cancer. I'm so sorry, and he told me that he offered to pay for your treatment, and you refused. And she says to Walt, as far as I'm concerned, as far as Elliot's concerned, this money is yours. You formed the company, your name is in the title, and she's kind of saying that you deserve this money, and we're happy to give it to you, and we want to give it to you. Please accept it. And he doesn't say anything, and she says, is this because of me and you? And Walt he's emotional, and then he steels himself and he says, I appreciate the offer, Gretchen, but the insurance came through anyway, so we're good, but thank you anyway. And she's crying at this point silently, and she says, we'll keep in touch, okay? Yep, sure. And he hangs the phone up, and it's just a heartbreaking thing because you see what Walt is going to, the lengths that he's going to provide money for his family. In the first episode, he goes to cooking crystal meth, and ends up killing 2 people. And it's such a dramatic departure from his regular life, but that's what he's willing to go to. Well, he wasn't willing to kill. That just kind of happened, and that was a byproduct of him going into this very dangerous business of cooking crystal meth, of creating drugs. But it's just really frustrating because you see that he doesn't need to do that anymore. He has this the treatment, which is going to cost so much money. So obviously he wants to go and well no, because I mean at this point, as far as he's concerned, he's done with the meth. He was trying to get money just to leave behind for his family, right? And to for everything. And to pay to go and see the doctors as well. I mean, there's kind of lots of what does he really want the money for? But obviously the main thing he wants is to leave this money for for his family. But at this point, he's done with the crystal meth. I'm really getting off track here, I'm sorry. Not every review is going to be perfect. I do these in one take, and I don't really take too many notes. I just kind of have a few bullet points. So, yeah, the frustrating thing is that he has an out. He doesn't need to go back to cooking crystal meth. I'll just jump to the end of the episode. He gets out of the car after the phone call with Gretchen, and he goes into Jesse's house, or into the back garden, and Jesse's turns up. And Walt says the famous line, just very simple, "Want to cook?" And that's the end. So he's been drawn back into the idea of, Jesse came with him with the $4,000 or whatever it was, and said, "This is how popular your meth was. If you want to do it again, let me know." They ended on bad terms, but the offer was kind of there. So Walt decides to go back and take it up. And at the end, you're like, well, why is he doing this when he can be given money legally for free, money that kind of is his? From what we understand, he was a big part in making the company Grey Matter, and obviously split up because of perhaps personal differences with him and Gretchen and Elliot. And they're offering to give it to him, but he can't take it because of pride. But it goes back to that thing where he says he wants to make a choice. If his treatment is paid for by Gretchen and Elliot, he's not making a choice. A choice is being made for him, and he's accepting that. So, foolishly, set in his ways and set in his pride, Walt decides to go back to the life of cooking crystal meth, and that is where we end the episode. And it's great. It's great without the idea, the notion that he's gonna get his treatment paid for free. Basically, these people who very much have got the life of luxury. They are loaded. This ain't even going to be a dent in their checkbook, to help Walt out. But he can't accept that, and it adds an extra layer of depth to the whole story, because the whole time now that Walt is going to be out there cooking crystal meth and everything that he's going to go through, we know that at any point he could call up Gretchen and Elliot and swallow his pride and say, okay, I'm ready to accept the offer, and he could move away from this life which already instantly in the first episode got him in a lot of shit, and 2 people were killed. And I suppose the whole show is really about the pitfalls of pride in a way. when you look at it through that lens, I suppose. But the lens of pride and what stubborn people will do when they don't want to accept the help of other people because they feel like it's out of pity. Anyway, I've been rambling far too long about this. I'm sorry, but I love this episode. It was fantastic. It's up there with the third episode and the first episode. Every other episode has been great. Well, they're all great, but every other episode, 1, 3, and 5, have been phenomenal. First class, first rate. And there's a few things I forgot about it, so I'm really looking forward to the next 2 episodes and finally seeing the end of this season for a second time, and to kind of reassess everything at the end and go through all the special features. Now, there are special features on this episode. There are 2 deleted scenes. The first one is an extended look of Walt and Skylar arriving at the party at the beginning at Elliot and Gretchen's house. They turn up and the valet takes their car, and the car kind of trundles away a bit, and they walk inside and they get a couple of drinks. I mean, it's a real nothing scene. It didn't even need to be on the Blu-ray. I got nothing out of watching it, to be honest. I mean, it's cool to see stuff you've never seen before, but it was a real nothing scene. The same can be said of the next deleted scene, which is Badger out in the desert while Jesse's cooking inside the RV, and he's firing with his crossbow. It's just a real dull scene. Nothing happens. The only good thing about it is he goes back into the RV and he puts on his gas mask and he does an impression of Darth Vader and was like, Luke, join the dark side or whatever. And we kind of saw a bit of that earlier in a montage of Jesse and Badger cooking. We heard him do the so the joke was there in that 2 seconds. You don't need the lead up to it. So yeah, 2 deleted scenes that were definitely best left on the cutting room floor. It was cool to see them, but nothing really added to the episode whatsoever. I can definitely see why they weren't in the final cut, and obviously with these shows they need to get it down to a certain running time, and oftentimes Vince Gilligan, the creator of the show and one of the creators of Better Call Saul, was saying in one of the podcasts recently for Better Call Saul Season 2 that when you're trying to cut stuff down in an episode and get it into length for broadcast on TV or whatever, down to those 42 minutes or whatever it may be, to account for the ad breaks, he says that sometimes it's not the best to kind of take little bits out of everything, but to just take one thing and just throw it out completely. And sometimes great scenes get lost, but in this case there was no great scenes getting lost. It was understandable why these were deleted, and I spent far too much time just talking about that. I didn't even need to mention it, to be honest, but I'm going to be thorough and watch everything on these discs. I'm looking forward to seeing all the special features very soon. That'll be in 2 weeks' time, I suppose. Also, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going back home to Wales for a couple of weeks, so I have no idea what I'm going to do. Am I going to binge watch a few episodes and get the videos done so that you can keep up with the weekly series for you guys? I don't know. Either way, thank you for commenting and watching these videos. I've enjoyed it very much so far. There's not a lot of views compared to my other videos, and well, it's kind of on par with some of my other videos actually. The Epic Film Challenge videos aren't doing too well in terms of views, but there are a few people out there who are following along and commenting and enjoying this series from what they've told me. So I appreciate you watching. I hope you do enjoy. And yeah, can't wait till next week, episode 6. I'm really excited to not see what happens because I've already seen it, but to see what bits I've forgotten about, and to see how my view of it might change and how I might reassess my thoughts on the first season even further. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. And remember, I almost forgot, remember always to tread lightly.
So you might say he's a really nice guy, really, but if fucking don't cut shit with me. He says he's really cool, but I think he's a tool.